Welcome, soul brothers and sisters. What do we do when we are devoid of touch and intimacy in our lives and we yearn for it? It is a basic human function. It's part of our psycho-emotional, spiritual makeup to want touch, to want a human connection, a close human connection. This is what a young gentleman, a follower, has written through. Let me read it out for you, and let's break this down because this is so important. This notion that we lack intimacy, it's not a female thing or a specific gender thing. It affects all of us. Let me read this out. This may touch you here in the heart. So looking forward to finding that person whenever that is. It's been a hard, frustrating road so far, though I know it's only a matter of time. What's your take on what to do until then? Besides continuing the work of self-mastery, becoming my highest self. Besides a relationship which recently ended again, in brackets, parentheses. I've been pretty much celibate my whole life, as well as mostly devoid of touch and love by women. While I see the benefits of being single and understand I might possibly have to wait quite some time to find that amazing match, not being able to express and experience non-platonic love and sexuality, being single is downright maddening at times, as it feels like being a caged bird not able to fly. Any of you resonate with this? Could go on, but I'll leave it at that. What is your experience with this? Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go break this down. It can be frustrating when we want something and we're not getting what we want. When we have an idea or a vision for ourselves of how life needs to be, it can be really frustrating when we're not living that experience in the now. And sometimes our timelines are somewhat warped. And so the most effective way to really be living in the moment and find joy and peace and clarity and all those feel-good emotions and states that make us or allow us to be more present in the moment is to really begin to appreciate what we have, to be in deep gratitude for what we're experiencing. And that is a noticing of what is working in our environment, what is working in our lives. Whilst we're doing that, I think something that's very, very important. And whilst, this young man mentions continuing to work on himself, continuing to be in that state of self-mastery, to be his highest self. Whilst that's amazing and very necessary, when we are experiencing a lull in our lives that we're not quite fully connected to, when we also have space in our lives, that is the time to continue that deep inner work. I always say it's very important that we spend time in singledom. We will grow in singledom in a way that we can't grow being in an intimate romantic partnership, in a sexually active partnership, whether that's with one person or many persons, depending on your disposition, depending on your sexual preferences or your relational preferences. And there's a level of growth that transpires when we are in intimate relationship as well that is very different to being in singledom, and so we need both. What I want to address here are some of the potential fears that may be arising. And this issue of celibacy. Active, deliberate celibacy can be very, very beneficial for us because it gives us context into how we relate to ourselves, how we deal with our own fears, how we understand our upbringing, how we understand and can go deeper into our belief systems, our unconscious and conscious belief systems, our models of reality, what helps shape the way we see ourselves and see the world. In singledom, and this is why it's important to take advantage of singledom, in singledom we can get a very clear reference for who we really want to be. How can we and how do we relate to ourselves in such a way that allows us to feel freedom and experience that from a deeper place? Now, he also goes to say, I've been pretty much celibate all my life, as well as mostly devoid of touch and love by women. Now, this can be really painful at a visceral level. We can come to gender dynamics, we can come to sexual orientation and different relationship dynamics. However, while certain relationship expressions will demand a different perspective, will be different, they will vary from each other, whether it be a heterosexual relationship to a homosexual relationship, or you have different cultures and religions coming together and spiritual expressions coming together. There are some basic things that every human being needs. Touch is one of them. To be seen for who we are is another. To be appreciated, loved, and cared for is another. The fact that this young man feels and has an experience of being mostly devoid of touch and intimacy and love by women, that is an insight into what is happening in his world. Why is it that he's been largely celibate? Is there a fear that is blocking him? Can he look within himself and begin to understand the patterns that he could potentially observe in relationship? A great place to start when you're curious about who you are and what you're experiencing, when you're just not happy with life, when you're not content with what you're experiencing, is to look at your previous relationships, whether it be with friends, whether it be with family, whether it be with intimate partners. Family and intimate partners are a great place to start. They tell us and teach us a lot about who we are and about how we see the world and see ourselves in relation to the world, how we want to give love and receive love, and how capable we are in those areas. Because sometimes we are blocked by our own volitions. We are blocked by our own personal experiences, the way we've framed them and the narrative that we've formed around that. And so you can go back into your previous relationships and ask yourself, what have been maybe some occurring or reoccurring patterns around how I've behaved in life, around how I've behaved in relationship when I'm facing difficulty, when I'm uncomfortable, and what has caused me repetitively to feel uncomfortable in relationship. And so if this young man and all of us that are in similar situations, because so many of us are, can begin here, this can be deeply, deeply empowering. And he states very openly, there's benefits in being single, but I'm also yearning for that amazing match. And so who do you need to be in the world to magnetize, attract that match that is resonant to you, that vibrates at your frequency, that feels you for who you are, that sees you for who you are? And what can you do if you're experiencing being devoid of touch, of female touch? If you're a man and you're a heterosexual man and you want that feminine touch, you want that female touch. Of course, feminine touch and feminine expression can reside in any physical human body. However, if you want that female touch, what can you do to experience that? Can you be more physically affectionate with your female friends? And it's not necessarily about sexuality. Maybe it's a hug. Maybe it's holding hands. Maybe it's going to a cuddle party where you go and you have an evening where you just hug someone and you feel that energy and you feel that love. Because if you can't practice being touched and touching others in a healthily expressive way, when there is less at stake emotively and spiritually and relationally, i.e. being in an intimate romantic partnership, you'll struggle to be that person in a healthy way in relationship. So what can you do in the now to really take advantage and ground in the person you want to be in relationship when you're not in relationship? And I hear you, brother. It's difficult. It's painful to yearn to be touched and yearn to be seen and yearn to be intimate, and you can't. There is great pain in that. And I want to let you know, and everybody else watching that's connecting to that and feeling that in their hearts and feeling that in their bodies and feeling that in their stomach, and it's churning, that it's impermanent. It's cyclical. It's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for expansion of your mind, your body, your heart, your soul. And in that expansion, you can grow into the next version of self. When we're repressed sexually, sexuality, our sexual center, is a way to express and be in the world. That's powerful. There's an example of some boundaries as well, right? And if you can't, we're talking boundaries for a moment, if you can't set healthy boundaries for yourself when you're outside of relationship, intimate relationship, you'll struggle to do it in relationship. So what that also means is that you will struggle to do it in relationship. And so how you relate physically and intimately to touch, and how you relate to sexuality and sexual expression, receiving and giving that can be challenged. And so you now have an opportunity to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that when you are not in that intimate relationship. For me, my personal experience was with this, and I've deliberately chosen to be celibate a number of different times in my life. It's given me a deep context into my fears, into my own beliefs. When I've chosen to be celibate, I've understood and unpacked and uncovered some of the fears I had around commitment and around freedom, around my freedom being a fear that I had, my freedom being taken away from me if I was in an intimate relationship, and what that would mean for me and me being in the relationship. And I started to uncover and unpack all that, and I drew that back down to childhood. And I started to understand that the childhood experiences that I had really affected my adult relationships and how I saw myself in adult relationships. And so when I've been deliberately celibate, and where I've had something like what I call a no feminine diet, where I've really moved away from femininity and female touch and contact, I've had time and space to go deeper within my own self and cultivate that expressive polarity within me at greater depth and greater level. Understand myself at greater depth and greater level, so I could then be that more whole person in relationship. And so for me, it's been a tremendously advantageous time. I've known then to go back into relationship, or at least be open to receiving, once I felt I learned, once I felt I gained wisdom, once I felt I broke some old patterns with myself, my self-talk, how I felt about myself, how I saw myself in the world, how I allowed others' behavior to affect me. When I started to become affected less and less by that, I started to grow and flourish as a man and as a human being in this world. And I started to give more in relationship without attachment. And I started to give more without needing something back. I would be able to give without having an expectation of needing something back. So it wasn't all about me, what can I get, what can I gain from the relationship, but rather it was more about how can I be more present in the relationship? How can I give and express in the relationship, and give without attachment and without a needing for something in return, but just to give and to serve. And in doing so, I was receiving. And there's so much power in that. So that's been some of my experience with that. And it's also been really tough at times where I haven't had that touch and I've had to learn to provide myself with that level of intimacy that's very important. And yes, it's different. It's completely different to having intimacy and receiving intimacy from a female or from the feminine. However, it doesn't make it less important, and it doesn't make it less valuable. Beautiful people, blessings on your journey. I'll see you again soon.